Oh, okay. So I can take over now.
OK， 好。请问 Facebook 的你们有听到声音吗？都听到吗？应该可以开始哦。Okay, good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you joining us tonight. Thank you for being here for the third session of our Mental Health Online Public Talk series. Tonight's topic is one that speaks to many of us, the power of parent-teacher unity. If you are parents trying to understand your child's behavior, or a teacher looking for new ways to support your students, or even someone who simply cares about the well-being of the children, this session is for you. So we are truly honored to have with us Miss Shay, the founder of LifeLink, the Durian Burhead, and a passionate advocate for child development and education. She will be sharing thoughtful insights, practical tools, and ways we can come together as our parents and teachers to create a safe, supportive environment where every child can grow and thrive. So, wherever you are joining us from tonight, make yourself comfortable, open your heart, and let's take this time to reflect, connect, and learn together. Thank you again for being here. So now, the time passed to Michelle. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Miss Chan. I hope those who are tuning in, thank you so much for tuning in this afternoon. But I would like to express my special thanks and my special gratitude to Yongping High School for giving me this awesome opportunity to actually share and discuss about what is closest to my heart, being a parent myself and also an educator for close to 20 years. So I believe very much that parent-teacher partnership is something that we can actually not run away from if we are talking about cultivating positive behavior. So I guess without further ado, let me just share what we are going to discuss about today. I will have a section and a segment towards the very end. If you have any questions, just feel free. I think drop into the comments or anything, since it's actually a Facebook Live. I will actually kind of stop if I need to address certain concerns that you actually have. Okay. All right. So I would like to actually give myself a short introduction. Okay, again, thank you again, Ms. Chan, for addressing myself. So yes, I am actually currently the founder of Lively Academy. So what my academy is actually doing, we are actually focusing quite a lot on the IGCSE, which is a Cambridge system for our students to actually go through the whole entire high school process. Okay, these are all my accolades. I actually started off as an early childhood educator, so I'm very passionate about education myself. So being in the industry, I emphasize on the importance of child development. If you're talking in terms of the psychological background, of course, I deal with also students who is also in terms of their diversity. I was previously an special needs educator, and then I actually moved over to Malaysia, because I think most of you do not know I'm actually from Singapore. Okay, to actually be a learning director in an international school. So before I actually became a founder of my own academy. Okay, all right. So for tonight, we will be discussing quite a lot of something that's actually very intimate. In particular, where we are actually trying to put the child, if you actually know what a Venn diagram actually looks like, we are putting the child in the middle of everything. Okay, and then we have two stakeholders, which is actually the parents and also the teachers. So we are going to slowly unpack certain things of understanding how important actually parent-teacher partnership is all about. So we are going to go through 4 different main components, mainly to actually understand why certain behavior actually manifests, and how do we actually deal with challenging behaviors also. So my very first talk that I will actually be sharing is actually the behavior dynamics, following in terms of how as parents we can actually be very resilient, Importantly, there must be this thing where we mentioned about communication, and also there's this term where we are trying to bridge over the collaboration part. And of course, I will definitely share practical insights on how do we actually reduce the manifestation of challenging behaviors. Okay, and I think I often like when people actually ask a lot of questions. So this is when I actually will be able to delve onto what we call a heart-to-heart session also. Yeah. Okay. So I think I would like to also emphasize that this talk today is really not to just equip you to actually understand how exactly it is actually important for us as parents. Yes, some parents may actually say that, yes, I'm only dealing with my kid at home. I don't know how else I can actually better improve in terms of dealing with my child when they are in school. So we want to understand that these strategies that I'm going to share is actually applicable to both, whether it's in school or also it being at home. Okay? All right. Okay. So the main goal for us over here for tonight, we want to understand that we are able to actually achieve a joint understanding of cultivating positive behavior. Okay, when I actually mention the word joint over here, meaning to say both parties have to work together. Okay, it's not only always the parents who is to be blamed. Sometimes teachers also have to take a back seat and understand that parents are also going through a lot when the child is actually home. Okay, when the child actually behave in school and the child misbehave at home, there must be a correlation to it. So we do hope that we actually achieve a certain goal, that is to have a joint understanding in terms of how do we prepare the child in this VUCA world. Okay, when we are actually understanding about underlying issues, why this particular child is actually behaving in a certain way, we also want to learn that there is a desired outcome, why we can actually reduce that manifestation also. Okay. Thirdly, do understand that every child is unique. Okay. Parents must also understand that by making comparison between siblings and siblings is not going to help in the long run. Sometimes, yes, teachers, myself also, I do make comparisons. I say, oh, why? You know, your brother is like this. How come your sister is? So those kind of comparison itself already rule out something that we would say that would cause a certain demotivation in the child. Okay, so how do we actually reduce all such behaviors and actually to promote the uniqueness in every child? Okay, and lastly, once we understand all the different journey that the child is actually going through, then we are able to actually reach a certain stage where we mentioned about acceptance. Okay, here I would like to use a certain understanding. Okay, when we actually have a child, okay, I'm trying to unpack between both parents and also teachers. Okay, it's something that is really predetermined. Okay, as parents, you cannot choose what your child look like, why your child is behaving that such. It's something that it's beyond supernatural stuff. Okay, sometimes we do question, you know, I pray so hard, I want my child to be a doctor, but eventually my child didn't become a doctor. Probably my child actually is interested in engineering. Sometimes we try our very best that we actually try to hot house from young, but it also doesn't happen. Similarly for teachers also. Sometimes you pray so hard in a classroom setting, you do not have a specific child in your classroom. But again, it's already predetermined before you actually became a teacher. So because of that, there's no way for us to change, you know, oh, why is this student always with me? Okay, I have this particular belief, right? The more you actually do not want this particular student, the more it actually magnetizes you. Okay, so usually that's the reason why I actually use a lot of positive energy, so that, oh, you know what, even though I get actually one of the students that most of the teachers do not like, when they enter my classroom, because of your positive vibes and your aura that you actually have, it actually molds the child into somebody that you never knew that it can be outstanding. So fate is something that we cannot change in terms of where the child is actually at. Moving along. In contrast to fate, sometimes we actually realize that, oh, you know what, my child is actually behaving as such because it's my fault. Okay, we tend to have this tendency of blaming ourselves. Do understand that sometimes because of certain understanding, okay, you always blame yourself. Okay, it's always about me, that's why the child is becoming like that. It's always because of certain behavior that I actually wrote out, the child becomes like that. Similarly, for example, if the teachers get very angry in class, right, usually you will scream and shout, oh, you know what, at the end of the day, the students just refuse to listen to me. I tend to tell myself it's my fault. But do understand that because if you keep on dealing about fault, then you realize that the outcome is what the desired one that you're actually looking at. So we are trying to shift what we call about the growth mindset over here. Similarly to parents, we need to deny the fact that, yes, parents, we tend to make mistakes. Do understand this proverb, success will only happen when we go through multiple failures. Yeah? Okay. This is something that most of us, if you are trying to understand certain behavior that actually surface in teenagers, okay, do understand that teenagers this age, they tend to actually go through puberty a little bit earlier, okay, because of how the environment has shaped them. Okay, back in our time when we are about 10, 20 years ago, we are probably not used to certain behaviors that we are actually having because we probably do not have any devices or technology as much or as advanced as today. So by understanding that there is some influence in the environment, we also understand that, hey, when this certain behavior is actually surfacing, we know that we can actually stop certain behavior at a certain junction. I'm going to give an example, yeah? If the child is actually manifesting a certain behavior at home, let's put it an aggression behavior, okay? Very aggressive. Why is the child very aggressive at home? It could be one, the child always gets whatever she wants, okay? The moment she has to enter school, in a school kind of setting, the child has to actually mellow herself down. At home, she gets everything she wants, right? But in school, she has to learn how to do turn taking, okay? Probably in a class size of about 30 students, of course, that kind of aggressive behavior will not manifest. So sometimes parents actually question, how come actually my child is actually behaving like that and my child is not behaving like that in school? And sometimes teachers say, oh no, actually, your child is very good in school. I don't see any problems as what you mentioned. So this part, we only need to understand that because there's an influence in the environment. Okay. Also understand there's also what we call the transition period. Okay. Teenagers this stage, when they are transiting from what we say, the primary school or the elementary section, right? They already understand that, oh, the moment I enter high school is what we call there's some form of freedom. Okay. They tend to rebuttal a little bit, but at the same time also they are trying to find their identity. So when they are trying to find their identity, we need to recognize that new behavior would also have new challenges in terms of their behavior. So over here, parents, once you understand there's an influence in the environment, there's also how we actually analyze the triggers. By understanding how we actually analyze the triggers, then we could actually understand why is there an underlying cause. I'm going to put it into context very simply. Okay, there's a lot of parents who actually come to me during my counseling session and will just say that, oh, you know what, Misha, I just can't handle my child. Okay, my child is beyond parental control. Okay, the moment I say something to her, she will definitely not listen to me. I think it's best for you to just take her because she listens everything to what you say. This is something that I always say, parents, please be very careful about what you say to your children. Because whatever you say to your children really, really matters. So you need to understand that there is actually an influence of an environment for that new behavior to happen. And for you to actually analyze that, you need to understand why is there this underlying cause also. Okay? So by analyzing that trigger itself, we also know there is this emotional responses. Okay? Do understand teachers and also parents, teenagers, what we call, which is the prefrontal cortex, uses a lot of what we understand why they make certain decision. Okay, the executive decision is what we can do. Okay, but teenagers find it very difficult. Okay, I want to be more adventurous. I want to take a risk. So because of that, they use a lot of their emotions. Okay, sometimes at this stage, parents always say, my teenager just refused to listen to me, right? Everything is all about friends, 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 because of how they actually respond to you. Take, for example, a teenager who has never been late during their elementary days. Suddenly, because of there's an influence in the environment, there's suddenly a certain trigger in their life, how they actually respond if they start to actually be late for school. Okay? Teachers and parents, you need to understand why is that happening. Could be there is a complexity in terms of their learning progression. Okay? Probably when they're in year 1, it's a lot easier for them to score all A's. As they actually progress to year 2, they progress to year 3, it gets more difficult. So all these things is about understanding there are always an emotional response to it. Okay? So moving along, as I mentioned, once we actually recognize that there are these emotional responses for teenagers to happen, parents are very clear what role do they have to play. Teachers are very clear what role I have to play also. So because we understand that there are multiple prongs that we're looking at, it's a progression. That's why I mentioned very clearly that when we talk about parent-teacher partnership, is a journey. Okay, it's not just an overnight kind of drama, or you know what, it's just a phase that this child is. No, it's never about a race that we are challenging towards the end of everything. It's a journey. There's a fluctuation in terms of their behavior, but we are always hoping for the best from the child. Yeah. Okay. Here, I would like to really emphasize on why is it very important for us to be very consistent. Okay, especially when we are talking about our high schoolers. Okay, I think there are a lot of experts out there who actually rely on this part. Okay, as teachers, as parents, once we are not consistent, right, you do understand that the child remembers it. So, there are various factors that I would like to actually share. How do we actually emphasize on understanding that when we have a certain routine, we have to follow through? Okay, that's the reason why we always say teenagers, they hold on to your words really strong. Okay, once you say something and then you deny of that certain unmet needs, suddenly they trigger that, Mom, I just don't want to talk to you. Dad, I don't want to talk to you. So that's the reason why at this stage, as high school parents and high school teachers, please be very careful about your promises. Sometimes we tend to overpromise certain things, and it's actually inevitable that things actually happen. Let me share with you one incident that I actually have. Okay, during what we call the PKP period, yeah? Okay, we actually say that, you know what, we can actually have a little celebration of classroom celebration because you all did really well, whatnot. Boom, it happens to be PKP. And what happens with PKP? Nobody gets to go out, right? That was a time where I tell you, my phone actually start, having texts, Misha, you didn't keep your promise. To them, they don't understand about this PKP period. Because to them, it's the promise that you actually made them. We're supposed to have our dinner. They are overwhelmed with their own emotional responses that to them, PKP is none of their business. So that's the reason why I say for teenagers, we tend to overpromise certain things and we cannot keep to that promise. So we have to be very careful about what we say to them because they hold very dear to it. Okay? So over here, where I'm trying to say it's something that is very practical. It's something that is very doable for parents and teachers to do it together. Okay? The first thing is what I'm trying to talk about in terms of environment again. I strongly would like to emphasize environment. I've said this many times and I'm going to repeat again throughout my whole entire session over here. Environment is something that shapes us. Okay, from the start, I actually mentioned whether it's an environment that actually influences the child. Now, right now, I'm going to delve in even deeper by talking about predictable environment. When we talk about predictable environment, we're talking about that the child is very familiar and, knowing that certain rules has to be enforced. Okay, I know parents this age, teachers this age, okay, what's one thing that teenagers really cannot let go of? It's like their hand, I would say. Definitely it's their gadget. Okay, you take away something from them, it's just seriously their life is gone. Okay, to them that is their prized possession. But why am I actually emphasizing on this part? I am trying to emphasize that there could be similar rules and expectations For example, in terms of usage of handphone. I know sometimes schools say, yeah, it's very easy, for us to actually give this rule. In a classroom, you're not allowed to. But I'm talking about specific meal times, for example. Okay, you've seen, right? There is this decorum of schools that, okay, during meal times, during break times, you are allowed to use your gadget, for example. Okay, and teenagers always say, oh, you know what? I can actually use during this is my free time. I can actually use my gadget. And it actually moved over to a transition where they are going to have meal times at home. And they start using their phone while they're eating this age. They find that there's nothing wrong. Why I need to anticipate certain behavior that it's okay. In school, while I'm eating, I'm actually watching my phone. Be very careful about this part, yeah, because it can be very challenging when we are trying to take something away from them. So that's the reason why we are trying to be consistent over here. If you are able to tell the child that during meal times is where we are trying to have a zero or free devices zone, we are trying to tell them why is it important to see what you're eating. So over there, we need to amplify that behavior so that it's very predictable to them. Why? The justification must be very clear that home and school is just similar. But we also must be very careful in terms of how we use it as a bait. Okay? The next one that we're talking about, trust. I always tell parents and teachers here, trust is really, really like a plain paper. Okay? And if you actually crushed it, you can actually see the wrinkles. Similarly, when we are actually handling teenagers, okay, to them, you are someone that they actually hold very dear to themselves. So when there is consistency between parents, teachers, and also the children, there is this thing of establishing trust. Okay, sometimes, right, at this stage, when the parents don't trust the students and teachers actually trust the student, they actually over depend on their teachers. They say, you know what, my teacher trusts me, I'm actually doing the right thing all the time. So they become over-reliant on another adult instead of the parents. So again, I must say that when we are talking about why they are dependent on our guidance and the support of both adults, we must also ensure there is consistency. That's the reason why when we build trust, we must ensure that this trust is also done both at home and in school. Yeah. This one I have to really, really emphasize again when we are talking about development of routine. Teenagers, please, teachers and also parents. Okay, I'm not saying that teenagers is someone that we lay certain rules that they are supposed to follow or throughout. Sometimes they do say that, oh mom, it's okay, I can sleep past 12 because I'm actually doing my self-revision or whatever not. I want you to also do regular check-ins. Okay, why regular check-ins are very, very important in terms of the development of routine? Because we want progression. Okay, certain behavior actually manifests when there is a regression of routines. Okay, sometimes we do emphasize, we have camps or whatever not, right? So they actually sleep past their sleeping time, which is probably 9 or 10. So once they actually sleep past their sleeping time, it's like, oh, you know what? It's okay. It's once in a blue moon where I actually have always camp. Be very, very careful also. They can actually transit into that kind of behavior of at home. Okay, so I'm not saying that camps are not good. Yes, it's actually good, but we must ensure at a certain age that it's good for them also. Similarly for home, there must be a development of routine that, hey, if we have been sleeping at 10 p.m., any self-revision that happens after 10 p.m., I don't think so it's actually good, because you need that hours of sleep for you to actually be able to listen to class tomorrow. Both sides must be agreeable to it, which means the parent and the student, so that it actually move over to school so that the child doesn't feel so tired when they actually go. So that development of routine is very, very clear. Because we do see that, sometimes parents actually say, you know what, I give you your phone, whatever happens in school is none of my business. Be very careful about that. So if you actually put in the routine by saying that, what happens after 10 p.m., I want you to switch off your devices. If you need me to put your devices in the living room and you're sleeping in your bedroom, do it. Okay, then that part is very clear. I have an example, a parent that actually shared with me, and I think this is an excellent example. Yes, it was actually a transition of how we actually build trust. Sometimes teenagers, they like to close the door, they like to lock the door, whatever this. But what the parents actually did very clear, when you are doing your self-revision or whatever it is, I want you to actually just close your door because you want your own little, what we call me time. But if you are going to sleep, let's ensure that all of us open the door. Okay, so I know that you are actually sleeping. So when the child is really, really sleeping, then only then parents actually close the door. So this kind of behavior, I think it actually develops certain trust and also certain routine, because you actually see that the child has enough sleep. The moment the child wakes up tomorrow for school, the child is actually a lot more happier. Okay, the last stage, I think it's something that most of us rely on it once we actually have what we call the predictable routines. By having all these predictable routines, we are actually ensuring that there's this level of comfort, this security for the child to be able to adapt to anything that is actually not juxtaposed to what they're supposed to do. Okay, so there's a lot of benefits when we're talking about routines and routines and routines, because there is this specific time block. Even in school, there's this timetable, right? After English, it's actually math and science and so on and so forth. Similarly, when there's actually a school holidays, parents, if you have to do this, please do it. Okay, they need to know that there's always this physical activity that they're doing, and there's always a break in between. Because sometimes parents say, oh, you know what, I have this problem when they actually have a school holiday. You need to talk to your teenager. Okay, you need to talk to your child to understand that once you actually establish a daily schedule, stick to it. Okay, this is something that I heavily maintain on, even at this stage, because we want to know the predictability of the child. Okay, sometimes we are not always at home to check on them, but with the schedule, we are very clear. Oh, it's only 1 p.m. Why are you using your phone? Shouldn't you actually be having like probably some breaks, or you are supposed to actually have some sessions with your teacher, some check-in or not? To be very clear about that part. The last one, which I actually wanted to actually share, is the unified approach. This one, right, we usually get to this stage whereby both the teachers and the parents feel very comfortable to just talk about anything under the sun about the child. Okay, remember I clear on my previous mention that I talk about the Venn diagram. The child is always at the middle of everything, and both sides is actually the parent and the teacher. Why do we actually talk about a unified approach? When we talk about the unified approach, we are trying to reduce a lot of destructive behavior. Sometimes the children is very smart. You know, they actually say that my parents say, okay, it's okay for me to be late, because they are always late every time also when they come to work. So it becomes a challenge for a teacher to say, oh, your parents say it's okay. Oh, so it's your parents who actually send you to school late. So this kind of thing, it requires a lot of what we call a predetermined management behavior. Okay, so again, like I say, I want to put caution to it. We must ensure that we are not making life difficult for any parties over here. Okay, we want to ensure that we are not working against each other, but we are working with each other. Yeah, okay. I'm going to touch a lot on the techniques now, because I believe that, you know, for parents to understand why the child is actually behaving right now, sometimes we also want to understand what the teachers have been doing good in school. Okay, sometimes we have to only wait towards the end of the progress report, then we are able to know, oh, why is my child doing this, why is my child faring in that. So over here, I'm trying to ensure that through these effective strategies, it can be practiced both at home and also in school. Let's move. Okay, very simple. It can be done in any age group that we're talking about. And I think it's still very, very relevant if you're talking about the high schoolers. It's very, very relevant even if you have an elementary child. For students who are still going through what we call the start of formal education. Okay, praise and encouragement. Okay, I am a big believer of what we call about praises and encouragement. Sometimes people say, hey, you know, when you tend to overpraise someone, they get a little bit demotivated to do something. It's like, you know, you dangle a carrot in front of the child always wants to wait for the carrot and the child do something. But let's put it at a certain and specific behavior for us to actually boost that motivation. Okay, yes, you may dangle that carrot in front of the child, but at the end of the day, what we are looking at is we are trying to actually increase their self-motivation. Self-esteem is very, very important, especially for high schoolers. You know, let me give you a context that is very, very simple. Okay, an outbreak. Okay, which is really something that the teenagers are going through, okay, an acne outbreak, okay, it actually demotivates them to actually go to school. Okay, I do have a session where, you know, this particular teenager is actually wearing a hoodie and also a mask. Before that, she wasn't doing that. So when I had my session, I was saying that, oh, you know, why are you doing this? And she exposed herself. She was going through the outbreak, and she cried. She cried really, really bad, and saying that, I'm not sure, Misha, why is my face like that as well? So you imagine if you don't praise and you don't encourage certain behavior, by getting the child to actually understand that, you know what, you can only get to where you are by appreciating yourself. So praising them to actually do what we call self-love, it's a lot of what we are trying to emphasize, this behavior of demotivating themselves. Teenagers, I tell you, they are so vulnerable that these days a lot of things happen. Okay, I don't want to go through that sensitive area, but I'm pretty sure most of us actually read a lot of cases about teenagers. So that's the reason why my number one, when I'm talking about praises and encouragement, is very important. So parents, teacher, be very careful. You know, sometimes when we talk about certain things, we forgot to praise them. Sometimes we say, yeah, you know, every day also very smart. Why I want to praise? No need, what, right? You're always very smart. Then what happens to the child? The child says, oh, yeah, actually it's true. Every day also very smart. Every day also very simple. So why? So that kind of thing will actually demotivate them to also want to do homework. Since I'm so smart, I don't need to do homework. So again, like I say, be very careful about what we say certain things to our teenagers this time. Yeah. The two that I mentioned here, I want to touch base a little bit about responsibility. Okay. I do handle quite a lot of cases whereby, you know, when they are actually firstborn. Usually firstborn is usually they say, oh, you know, you have very good leadership, you take on a lot of responsibilities, so on and so forth. But the tables will be turned the moment they actually enter school. Okay. Sometimes they just want to tell themselves, I don't want to do anything. You know, it's okay, you all can take. You want to be the class monitor, you want to be the class, you know, prefect or whatever it is, I'm not going to take. I don't want to be a peer leader. Because why? They are over exhausted. You know, they go through what we call fatigue of dealing it at home. So parents and also teachers, how do we actually encourage positive reinforcement is to actually make them feel valued. Okay, yes, this is what you're good at. Let me see what other things that you are good at. So I started this program what we call the mentor-mentee. Okay, a mentor-mentee can be of different strength. We're not only talking about just purely that they are good at this and then they overemphasize. If you're good in math, sometimes you may not be good in languages. So the mentor-mentee program is really something that really boosts teenagers. Because, for example, if the child is really good in sports, right, technically the child may not be very good in academic. So that's when they actually get a booster. You know what, I'm very good in playing football, but maybe in class I'm not too good. So that mentor-mentee program actually developed them to actually have good sense of responsibility and also leadership, because they actually feel valued at the right time and the right place. Okay. The third point that we're talking about, this one, sometimes we tend to have a lot of what we call delayed gratification, where, oh, it's okay, you know, that this behavior, we can wait. Maybe we see another few more days. Again, like I say, I want to put a cautionary to this. Yeah. If you know that certain behavior requires immediate feedback, please, by having immediate feedback, it will actually strengthen both connection between the teachers and also the parent. Why I say it's very important, because we are dealing with teenagers. Again, like I said, they are very vulnerable. They are very volatile. It's like where we are talking, they are literally walking in very thin glass. Okay, that's the reason why when I talk about teenagers, sometimes they snap under what we call the pressure belt. Okay, once they snap, it's because they realize that, you know what, first I don't get any praise and I you know, I'm not being encouraged, I'm so demotivated, and then suddenly I've had additional responsibility for me to do this. I need to deal with a complex learning progression. For example, I mentioned it earlier on, right? From year 1 to year 2, it's very easy for them to score straight A's. The moment they have to take their SPM, it's a lot more difficult, and then additional leadership. So that kind of connection that they actually see, if they don't see immediate feedback, they just cannot strengthen themselves and they just feel weakened, especially between parents and teachers. So we need to ensure that, you know, when a teacher actually sees good behavior or a behavior that requires some attention, Parents, please step in also. So that immediate feedback actually regulates them all over again. And teenagers really, really need this. So be very mindful about any change of behavior. A bubbly teenager sometimes can be very quiet. So I'm not asking that you need to press the alarm button, whatever it is, but please, maybe, you need to spend more time with your teenager, just probably put aside some work, just to ensure that everything is going fine. I know sometimes the teenagers just say, no, I'm okay. Usually when I mention to parents and also teacher, the moment they say they are okay, or, they just reply with a thumbs up, something like that, we need to actually recalibrate everything again. If we need to put a pause on certain things, we put a pause. Okay. I just want to overemphasize that teenagers these days, once they snap, they automatically they will snap. Okay. There's no returning back. So that's the reason why I say at this stage, teenagers, we really must handle with what I always say, TLC, tender loving care. Because tender loving care is the only way for them to actually understand that my teachers are always there for me, my friends are always there for me, my parents are also always there for me. That's the reason why I would like to also emphasize again on number 4, which is the personalized reward. I do encounter quite a lot of teenagers, a lot of teachers who say, oh, you know what, I always have this blanket method where I give everyone the same thing. I give a class treat, everyone gets to eat pizza. Okay, that's fine, I'm done. But we forget that the personalized reward, I'm not saying that personalized rewards have to be something that is actually materialized. What I like to do is I usually will get books for my students, and I actually write personalized notes. Okay, books that talks about their character. And when they actually receive those books, I know these days students, they don't understand books because they say, oh no, I can actually use whatever tablet, my phone. But I want them to emphasize that the moment they touch a book, the smell of the books and everything, it gives a different sensory effect. So that's why I tell them, be very mindful when I keep on emphasizing that readers are leaders. Okay, the more you read, the more you understand. Doesn't matter whatever it is. That's why I keep on emphasizing. Getting books is the only way for you to actually understand why we still have books on the shelf. So personalized reward doesn't have to be something that is a prerequisite thing, but do understand that it's a lot more meaningful for them. Another contra that I would like to say, some parents actually say, oh, you know what, at the end of the day, I'm going to bring you to a trip, a family trip, because you all did very well. You're straight all stars for your SPM. Then you suddenly realize that, actually, I don't need all this. It's not what I want. Because probably you have 3 or 4 kids. No, actually, I don't want to go for this trip. I want to go. So personalizing it is actually more meaningful rather than blanket reward. So that itself have to tap on the individual interests and also the individual preferences. Do have what we call a goal setting together with your child. So your child actually know that once I set a goal, I also have a certain reward that I'm actually looking forward. So it's actually very much intimate. So you know that, child A wants this, child B wants this. Being a parent, like I say, right, it's not just a walk in the park. Being a teacher even also, right? Sometimes you know that this particular A is like that. Tomorrow, another pattern. So again, like I say, I always tell my colleagues, teachers, if you were to unscramble your word, the word teacher, right, you can actually spell the word heart. You must actually have a very big heart for you to actually handle the students. Similarly for parent, right, if you unscramble yourself, right, from the word PARENT, you can actually unscramble what we call the word rant, RANT. Means the child can rant to you. You can rant to the child because the child feels very safe with you. Yeah? Okay. Moving along to the next one. Here we are talking about this part. Very close to my heart also because I deal with a lot of parents, I share quite a lot of insight on myself as a parent, as an educator. I want you to understand when we're talking about communication, okay, do understand that you need to communicate with empathy. We're not just saying it for the sake of saying. Sometimes I do have a teenager who say, you know what my parents do every day, just nag and nag and nag and nag and nag. How do I actually turn it very positively? I always tell them, when your parents nag, means your parents care for you. Once your parents actually stop nagging at you, that's when they actually stop whatever that they want to do. So then they pause. They're like, oh yeah. Then I asked them again, I said, do you like that cold treatment? So that's why I said, imagine, you have to change that desired behavior for them to see something that's very positive. So that's the reason why when we're talking about communication and collaboration, it's very important between parents and teachers to really, really collaborate. So that's the reason why I actually emphasize on the impact of language. Okay, we are touched on both the internal factors and also the external factors. I kept on saying, be it whether we are talking to the teacher, be it whether we are talking to the child, the choice of words are very, very important. It's a very delicate thing, like I say. I have this proverb that I always use. Words can be sharper than a knife. It can pierce through your heart and it can remember you for life. Yeah. So it's a significant thing that we have to say that first impression lasts a lifetime, which is very true. Why do people say that? Because whatever you say, the first thing, the child always remember what you say about this child. I do have this thing where the child used to fail quite a lot, go through my counseling session, the remediation was clear that the child, could actually do well. But because of the choice of words that you actually say to the child, how the child actually internalizes those things. The external factor is something sometimes we can control, okay? But sometimes, like I mentioned about the environment, whether the circle of people that we're with, sometimes the child just say, oh, I actually enjoy being with my group of friends because the way how they talk, how they carry themselves, it's super cool, you know what? Or they use this certain slang and whatever not. So language itself is ever evolving, okay? How we influence the child, what kind of culture we are in, it always starts with language. Yeah. If I were to talk about, how the child starts to read, how the child starts to talk, how the child starts to listen, it's also from the environment. So language has a very, very deep impact on how we actually talk about how we reach to where the child wants to be at the desired goal. Okay. So moving on to the next one, where I want you to actually understand when I'm talking about overcoming stereotypes, okay, because of languages. The first one, parents and also teachers. Both parties and both stakeholders actually have very or KPIs, or you want to tell yourself that, oh, because I have dealt with this particular child for a number of years and I want the child to be able to score something. Of course, right? You have a certain belief, I come from this thing, similarly for parents also. You have a certain belief that I mentioned earlier on, hot housing. Doesn't mean that you're a doctor yourself, eventually the child becomes a doctor. That sometimes doesn't work. If let's say we keep on telling ourselves, oh no, sometimes they say yes, through a lot of belief, through a lot of powers of prayers, the child. But do understand that this age, sometimes I question, I have this particular student say, you know what, teacher, I can actually make millions really overnight. Why? Because I have the gift of the gap, I can do that. So our expectations and their expectations are very different. So, but as a unified thing that parents and teachers have to emphasize that, hey, look, yes, you can be a millionaire at the age of 15 and 16 through your gift of the gap, but be very mindful that later on you still need your education. Yeah. Do understand that through the soft approach that we're looking at, we are bringing them back to reality. I always tell a lot of my students, the way you say certain things is like as if you're floating. You're at cloud nine, suddenly I like this, but let's get you grounded. One very good strategy that I always do with my students is to get them grounded by asking them to actually remove, if they're wearing socks, to actually remove their socks and to actually ask them to step on the floor. If sometimes they say, oh no, sir, I'm not very comfortable because I have certain things I don't want to touch, it's okay. Then get them to actually touch their hands on the table. Oh, they are grounded right now. They need to face reality. Okay, hardship will only start after they actually exit the high school. Because why? They're going to enter tertiary and they're going to enter the university life where they have to do a lot of project works. They have to ensure that different personality, there's clashes and whatnot. They just have to keep up the timetable. So a lot of things that's going to happen to them. Okay, so again, when we communicate with a lot of things, we are trying to communicate our belief and asking the child to face reality. Next one, the societal norms, right? Again,
好，可能展示的遇上一些技术的问题，我们稍等他回来哦。好，这边呢，我们有听到呢，刚刚讲师有提到说有一些方法去跟我们的学生去沟通，跟在家里面可以怎么样跟我们的小孩子去相处。在这个部分呢，刚刚讲师有提到说有用一些 language 的问题，就是语言，我们用什么样的语言去跟我们的小朋友去沟通呢？我们刚刚就是提到这个部分。所以呢，如果这个部分大家有什么问题的话，欢迎在下面的留言里面提问。Yeah, you can.
All right, Ken. I'm so sorry, viewers. Whoever is still watching, I I really apologize for the technical errors. Pardon me. Okay. As far as you're concerned, that's the reason why I like a physical kind of workshop whereby it's just me and the audience. Yeah. Okay. So coming back to the point where I actually mentioned about the impact of language I shared on. Okay. We're trying to get the high school teenagers to be very grounded. We also want that, through certain behavior, we are able to actually go through what we call the societal norms, because sometimes it's something that we cannot run away from. There is this thing that they say, oh, you know what, girls are supposed to be doing this, boys are supposed to be doing this. As far as when we are trying to diversify that part, it's just an unwritten rules. It's not something that we can run away from. But again, like I said, there's this impact of when we talk about parents-teacher partnership, we are able to accept certain things. Okay, that's the reason why I mentioned about the societal norms. These days, a lot of things happen because it's a little bit more globalized. It's a little bit more revolutionized, like I said. Okay, things like that in the past can be done, but these days, it's done a certain way. One thing that I always like to emphasize for both parties, which is the teachers and the parents, all we need to do is we just want to embrace individuality. Again, I mentioned about uniqueness of the child at the middle of everything. We are able to accept the child's flaws. We are able to set a certain standard for the child, certain expectation of the child. Doesn't mean that the child probably didn't make it so well for the SPM, the child failed throughout the whole entire life. Okay? That's why we have to be very rooted in terms of having this partnership so that we can overcome all these sorts. Sometimes if the child were to actually retake their SPM, there is a certain things that the child is going through, to embrace that part. Certain group of students require maybe another year or two just to finish up certain subjects, then accept it. Doesn't mean that they fail everything, they fail in their life. No, sometimes they hit the pinnacle of everything when they realize that what I can do now, I can probably do better in the future. Okay. So next one, moving on. Get my slides. Okay. This is something that I want you to actually also understand. Yeah. When we talk about effective communication, there are multiple areas that we are looking at. First, I always mention it has to be a joint goal setting. Parents and teachers, you cannot misconstrue the message when we're talking about a joint goal setting. Okay. Only then when we actually have something that is reached based on the both consensus, then we can actually have an open dialogue. Not until we agree upon something, there's no way for us to actually have an open dialogue. There's no way for us to even communicate in the first place. Where I agree to this, you disagree to that, I choose to challenge this. No way. The child is at this because of something else that we disagree upon. Only when you actually agreed upon something, we reach a certain consensus, then we can actually have a discussion about how we can actually improve the child. Trust me, when we actually have open communication, only then we realize that there is a cycle where we are going to see that the child actually improve. It's not just an overnight kind of thing. It's a journey that the child is going through. Maybe at year 1, the child is misbehaving terribly. You will see at year 5, maybe the child is the top student, a valedictorian at year 1. It does happen many, many times, I would say. Okay? So, as I said, first, you must ensure that to reach a collaboration, you must understand there must be this goal setting that both parties agree, the two stakeholders, the teachers and the parents. Only then you can actually go into an open dialogue. And lastly, you can actually see a continuous improvement in terms of how you communicate with each other to reach a certain goal that the child is actually improving. Yeah? Okay. So, I always use this quote, yeah? In the word team, there's no I. That's why I always say that parents, you always need to communicate with the children's teacher. You may be the best of everyone, but you are able to communicate to the teachers because you actually know the know-how. I do have a lot of sessions where sometimes we rebuttal with our parents because the parents is probably doctors, lecturers, professors, because they know everything, right? But over here, when we're talking about, we must ensure that both parties are giving what we call the reassurance and the genuine encouragement for the child. We're not fighting with each other for the sake of fighting, but we're doing this for the sake of the child. The child is growing up. We are probably done growing at that stage because we probably achieve whatever we need to achieve, but the child needs to understand that. So there's no way for you to do an I approach. I want this, I want that. But it's a collaboration between both stakeholders. Yeah. So do emphasize on this part again. Like I said, there's no I in a team. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to move on to a little bit of understanding some in-depth why certain behaviors actually manifest in the classroom, so this part, I would say that we want to understand certain misbehavior, certain misconception also. Definitely number one, something that we cannot run away from. That's why we say, right? Oh, the reason why the child is like that is because the child follow the father, the child follow the mother. It is what it is. We cannot deny that biological factor is something that actually shape the child. Okay. Again, I want to emphasize about environment. That's why I always say I am a true believer about environment. You put a child in the right environment, the child will develop where the child is. Okay. You put a child in a wrong environment, that's where the child also will be. So this part, there's no way for us to actually go through in terms of how we're going to impact that behavior. So parenting styles, I do have a certain workshop for parenting styles. Parents have to go through certain workshops for them to actually kind of rebuttal with their partners, even though they go through separation or divorce, they just need to agree upon what we call the co-parenting. Okay, because the child is very important at this stage where they actually meet. Okay. The third point where I actually mentioned about the learning and the education, because why? We are talking about education at the heart of everything. If teachers and parents always argue about the child's behavior non-stop, there's no way for the child to actually learn. So this one again, I say, it trickles down. Once you're able to accept, it's because of like certain condition that the child has, okay, there's no way for us to change that part. Remember I told about the fate, right? It's fated that the child is like that. But let's shape it in terms of the environment. Oh, the child requires this certain behavior in that environment. Let's try and move it. Only then learning and education comes hand in hand. Okay? All right. The next one. This is one I actually always do during my workshop. But usually in my workshop, I will get it to go into groups or this, where this group of teachers will actually be the home, which is acting as parents, and this group of teachers will be acting as school. And then when I do parents workshop also, I tend to get them to play both roles. Okay. Why I say it's very important for us to actually do this, because you can actually see a lot of progression when the child actually see both stakeholders are actually working hand in hand. In school, let's start with home. At home, parents are somewhat the gatekeepers to teach coping strategies. Okay. When a child cries, what kind of coping strategies would the parents do? These coping strategies becomes a mechanism of how they actually survive in school, because in school they are being taught what we call the social skill training. You need to wait for your turn. If at home you don't emphasize on how to actually wait for your turn in school, that's when the manifestation of behavior occurs. So you see how we actually move along from that. You don't teach them the coping skills, the coping strategies, they cannot move. Sometimes the teacher say, I have this coping strategy that I can do. But sometimes the child actually spends more time in school than at home. So that's where the training starts. Okay? At home. Parents. If you model a certain behavior, you are just like that. Usually I will say something like, a child is a plain canvas. We are the painters. We paint the child as what we wanted. So if we are someone who always have very short fuse, and then we want to tell the child, you know what, keep calm if you're under pressure, keep calm if you're under pressure. There's no way for the child to understand that. Okay, why? Because if the child goes to school, the child has a lot of pressure, right? With the peers, whatever it is, you know what? I'm not happy what I do, I retaliate through violence. Because at home it's really like that. So that modeling only happens when they actually see both parents. This is how they actually. That's the reason why I always say, parents, when you go through an argument, please try as much as possible to avoid in front of a child. Because I always say, a child is actually sitting on a plate. So when something that is so broken that is actually happening at home, there's no way for them to transit over to another environment. They feel very insecure. They are, at that stage that they don't know how they feel safe. In terms of where the security part, they get very lost. So when in school they are trying to model their positive behavior with their peers, they can't, because at home it's a chaos. Okay. Lastly, again, like I say, it's going to end at home. We want to ensure that there is a lot of choices and empowerment. so that it carries over to their responsibility and their leadership. This one is key for most high schoolers. They are dying, they are hungry for a lot of choices. That's the reason why when we give them choices, they know what they can do. And once they reach empowerment, you see, usually our key players are always, those who are actually at the year 5. I can do this, I can do this. Sometimes the teachers just relax, right? When they're at year 1, they can't do this, they can't do that. But once they actually reach a level of empowerment, that's when the both stakeholders are upon what I call the enlightenment, because they can just relax and sit back. So this is the part where I can actually say that it's a transition from home to school, and then it transits back and forth. Yeah? Okay. Like I mentioned earlier on, yes, this self-regulation is something that's so key. Teenagers at this stage, yes, they're very impulsive. Sometimes parents also get very impulsive, but once we teach them about certain awareness, we know how to verbalize our feelings. Only then we are able to understand that our teenagers are able to do what we call conflict resolution. Remember I told you about the social skills training and everything happens in school? But please understand that this awareness only happens when they see the key players at home. Right? They cannot carry themselves if they don't feel safe at home, and they become very chaotic in school. Okay? They can be very chaotic in school, but they can be very calm at home. So you need to understand and analyze where the triggers is. Yeah? Okay. Again, I said I'm really a key player in terms of understanding how we can actually support the environment. Okay? This is something that I want you to understand. Okay? Let me just talk about school first, because school is usually like a certain hour, and then when they have a break, that's it. Okay, school, basically all you need to do is you have to ensure that the place is physically safe, is conducive for learning. But kind of easy, right? Because the teacher will say, it's okay. After finish school only, right? I'm done with this kid, that's it. But we must also ensure that through that organization, we also emphasize that there is always a support for us to carry over for the child to bring it home. Parents, please. I know sometimes we can be very busy. We do not know when we can find time. Okay? When I emphasize about quality time, I'm not only talking about quality, but I'm talking about being present. Okay? When we're talking about being present, which means we want to be able to see the child's milestone. Okay? Sometimes we forget certain competition or certain tournament that the child has been waiting for you to be able to. Please, that bonding session where you actually can have, it offers a lot of opportunities, That's the reason why you see a lot of successful teenagers, right? They become full of confidence because both sides, the school and also the home, is somewhat that actually shape them. I'm not talking about, they being good in this, no. But they being the significant key player because they understand that both parties are actually working hand in hand. Yeah? Okay. This one I want to emphasize both for teachers and also for parents. Please, there's always a clause where I mentioned when you are address the child as an individual. Please do not compare at any junction if you can. Okay, the child is always an entity on its own. Yeah. Okay. This one I mentioned, you must understand that it's circumstances beyond control versus personal responsibility. Okay, again, like I said, you don't know what all these are going to happen for parents, right? Until, sometimes you scared and you say, oh no, it's a boy. And sometimes come out, girl. I bought all this. So that kind of thing, you cannot control when it's like that. But how we are going to raise our child, it's our personal responsibility. Yes, you could go through whatever it is, right, at that stage. You don't want to accept, But through our moral compass, it's because it's our personal responsibility. Same for teachers also. I'm not talking about the gender, but sometimes, you have a certain what we call the social norm, right? Particular student, because he's a girl, has to behave like that. Why are you behaving like a boy? A boy is supposed to behave like that. So all these things are circumstances beyond your control. So you must go back to what is your personal responsibility as a teacher, as an educator also. Yeah? Okay. So that's why I mentioned that for you to actually nurture a well-rounded individual is to understand that it's very much child-centric. Understand what the child is going to do, because we are done. It's a done deal for us. We have achieved whatever we have to achieve right now. So it's the child's turn for us to put. Okay. Sometimes the child it's not successful at the moment. But why? So we focus back again. as parents and as teachers. Again, I mentioned about being consistent in terms of strategy. If this strategy doesn't work, implement it on both sides. The third part, yes. This one, sometimes like I said, we tend to be very forgetful when we actually forget to actually succeed. To celebrate success, whether is it big or whether is it small. That's the reason why I always say praises and encouragement is something that we want to actually ensure that it becomes a holistic person altogether. Yes, a child may be academically driven, but maybe the child is not ready to go out in the in the social setting. That's why we actually must ensure, why are you not ready? Why are you not able to speak up in front of a person? Is there any reason that we're looking at? So both teachers and parents have to play a very key figure over here. Yeah? Okay. Parents and also teachers, both alike. If you're required to actually seek support, please seek support if you are trying to raise a challenging teenager at this stage. Yeah, I'm not saying that I am going to share any sob stories or whatever it is, but I've dealt with quite a lot of traumatic cases where parents are in denial, where teachers actually say that, oh no, since the parents are difficult, why do I share all this news? But please, understand that the child is somewhat your responsibility. It's a shared responsibility. Yeah. So when you need to ask for support, sometimes you may say, in a school setting, it's very hard for me to talk to my homeroom, my partner who's dealing with kids. And at home, sometimes parents say, it's very hard for me to talk to my wife, talk to my husband. But please, do understand the heart of everything is the child. I'm going to share with you this part, which is actually the grief cycle. Okay? The start of everything is always communication. You receive a lot of information where you understand that, the child is like that. Yes. We tend to deny, you know what? It's okay. The child is growing up. The child is at this stage. It's only at year 1. Maybe the child failed. It's a lot of denial, okay? If you see this whole entire cycle, it's going back and forth. But if you understand this whole entire grief cycle, it's about receiving information at which point of time. How do we communicate with the child? The importance of receiving the information, the importance of how we deal with the child at this stage is where we will go through the second stage, which is anger. Okay, first you deny, right? You know what, certain behavior is like that. Okay, I deny. Okay, then you realize that, okay, I tell you what, I will just go through this. Fine, my kid is not behaving. Okay, I accept. You say this, right, teacher? I accept. You go back with a lot of frustration, a lot of anger. Then what? The child goes home, that's it. I tell you what, your teacher said you don't behave in class, right? You're not doing your homework. You pass on your anger to the child. Once you pass off anger to your child, right? The child is not to be blamed. The child is still a child after all, right? The information that you're giving to the child and you're telling the child that, hey, look, this is how I handle stress. This is how I handle irritation at this moment. Be very careful again, I say. This part is something that we ensure that only we are able to be very calm, the child is able to receive whatever the child needs to receive. Again, I mentioned about the support just now. Okay. When you are able to receive the emotional support, which means you are at your lowest, I would say. Okay. Because you are struggling to understand, why? I'm doing this, I sacrifice everything. Some mothers even sacrifice, while the child is taking SPM, I've heard before, yeah, the child wants the mom to just focus on me. Or maybe the dad has to top up a little bit more of enrichment classes, tuition classes, whatever it is, right? Struggling and everything. Okay, you tell person this, you hear this and that. So at that stage, you are just telling yourself, where is the best of everything? Even the teacher will say, oh, know what? Mrs. So-and-so, we try this one. So both of you are at that stage of understanding. So both of you are receiving what we call emotional support. Okay, and this emotional support is where we are actually that, okay, look, both of us are feeling this way and this is what we're going to do. Now we are going to go up a little bit in terms of elevating our feelings, yeah? Because we are already, understanding, because we already go through that, say, okay, now we are a little bit more depressed. Okay, from just now we are a bit more angry, right? Now we are a bit depressed because we feel like, you know what, I'm just going to go through this thing. I just accept, just accept for the sake of accepting. But you haven't reached the peak of the peak where we call the acceptance stage. We just accept for the sake of accepting because we feel that, okay, I'm just overwhelmed. I cannot take it. I overthink certain things. Because why? You receive the support, but it's not the proper guidance and direction that you're looking at. But once you actually hit the highest peak of what we call the grief cycle, right, which is pure acceptance of what the child is, and when you are able to explore and plan certain things and moving from there, you have a clear direction of why the child wants to be like that. Only then you realize that yes, both parties, which is the teachers and the parents, are the part where they realize that, I always have this moment where they actually receive results, right? The result day, right? You do see that sometimes both parents and both teachers are hugging the child. My goodness, that is really the sense of fulfillment for what we call an extremely good teacher and parent partnership. Yeah? Okay. This part, like I said, there's no way for us to actually run to. We definitely need to actually emphasize of the individuality. We need to recognize and support the child's needs, whether this child wants to be like that, the child wants to go through and become some, go into robotics, if the child doesn't have that. So every passion means something because they are into what we call this era where, this is a stage where I'm growing. Okay, I need to learn how to make mistakes. Only then I realize that, this is where I actually want to be at one day. Yeah? Okay. So at this stage, I think I'll pass the time if you have any questions or anything, because I would like to hear from the floor also what I've actually shared. So maybe to Ms. Chan, if I do have any questions that I can actually address from the floor.
Okay, is there any questions from the Facebook chat box? Let's check. Okay, so I have some questions for Ms. J. And yeah, I feel a bit struggle because there's in the class there's around 30 to 40 students in the classroom. Actually, it's quite hard for the teachers to build up a supportive environment among the class in the classroom, because the level is quite a big in sometimes. So can you what strategies can be suggested to the teacher to build up the relationship or the bonding among the students with different level?
Sure. I think this question I do hear quite a lot, the struggles of teachers here. If I were to say, we're not only talking about the junior teachers, some senior teachers are still struggling on handling students at this stage. Okay. If you're talking about the demographic of a class, right? Usually my personal take, right? If I have to take a solid 1 month of understanding my students' interest, I will do that. Teaching will not occur until we get the class together. So usually I have to do what we call the team building, the class, get together, understanding, this particular boy cannot sit with this boy, this girl cannot go with this girl and whatnot. So again, like I said, your prepared environment is the key of getting the students to want to do with you. Okay, I have dealt with a class of, I think about 35 students, which is actually the tail end class. Okay, which the whole entire school said that if you take this class, right, that's it, man. You will fall sick almost every day. Okay, I took up that challenge. I was thinking, okay, why do teachers say like that? So what we did is actually we do what we call a crash course. Okay, but all of us need to talk about our differences. We are in a school setting, and in a school setting, there are rules and regulation. Okay, you have to give the respect to the teachers because the teachers have prepared their lesson plans, their worksheets, so that you get to where you are. So if you're challenging the teacher who is standing in front and you think that you're so great, then you try and be a teacher. You try it, then you know how exactly a teacher will feel. So that part gives them a certain understanding that yes, in life it can be very challenging. And I always say, if you were to make your life difficult for a person right now, wait till you move 5 years later. You will see that that challenge that you give to that person is the challenge that you're going to get a return. I'm not saying that it's something got to do with karma or anything, but we are working what we call a two-way traffic. Okay, so that's why I say sometimes I like to pick up very challenging students, because understanding the challenging behavior, right, is where we actually find that sweet spot. Sometimes teacher will say, I don't understand why you like to take on difficult classes. Because difficult student is the one that brings you to where you want to be. Because if you get all the in a classroom setting, if you get all the students who are very smart, very easy. What they want is straight A's. Sometimes you put them in a society where, you know what, when they go out, it's like a cookie cutter. But when you get a very challenging students and you get them to be together, these are the group of students who always come back to you. If you realize, right, usually, for example, for my case, right, Teachers' Day, right, usually your most difficult student is the one that remember you. The most challenging student is the one that always remember you. So again, like I say, yes, it can be a way of understanding. Yes, you have a certain KPI, a certain lesson plan for you to actually finish up. But learning will not take place when behavior is still occurring. Yeah. So you need to handle that behavior. If it requires you to actually find so-called what I call a ring leader in the class, right? Talk to the ring leader. You know why? If you're going to behave like that in the classroom, right, it's going to disrupt a lot of my things. Imagine yourself, right? If you're going to disrupt these classes every time when I'm actually supposed to do this, how much are you going to actually achieve on that? Yeah. So I always talk to my students with a lot of empathy. Empathy, which means is to put yourself in their shoe. Okay. Sympathy is just, you very kalian eh. Okay, I tell you what, tomorrow you are like that. So kalian, I tell you what, it will not go very far. Okay. But understanding of putting yourself in their shoe. For example, those who are coming, from a broken marriage, right? They usually manifest certain destructive behavior. Okay. Once you get them through that traumatic experience, I tell you, they are the people who actually you will remember the most. Yeah. So, Miss Chan, like I said, sometimes it requires certain touch points, as teachers. You just need to understand that sometimes you also deal with very difficult parents. But these very difficult parents, right, at the heart of everything like I mentioned is because they care for the child. They have gone through a traumatic experience on their own. Probably, conceiving their child is also very traumatic for them. That's why every day also they will ask you, Miss Chan, I want to see you because my boy, Miss Chan, every day also want to see you. For the sake of seeing you. Sometimes you look at them also, you're very pekcek, again, this person, why every day also want to see me? Because you know why? They require, like I mentioned, the emotional support. They have no one to talk to. And they have established that trust with you. They want to talk to you. So sometimes you feel like, again, you want to talk to me, is it? So give yourself some time frame. Okay, Mr. So and so and so, I have this much of time. I'm sorry, but I only have 10 minutes. Within these 10 minutes, you need to concise what you want to share. So that part you're taking in charge of the conversation. And parents actually, they are fully aware. Oh, okay, you only have 10 minutes. Is it okay? I will use these 10 minutes very fruitful. So understand that this behavior is like that. So I hope I do actually answer your question in terms of how do you actually model that behavior to get, I won't say a perfect class, but at least a class that you can actually deliver your lessons. I tell you, teachers is something that I always salute. Yes, if I think back of how I handle my high schoolers every day, sometimes I say, our lesson can be 1.5 hours, but our nagging at them can be 30 minutes, and we're left with just that moment to just continue what we're supposed to teach. But the essence of everything, sometimes when you click with them, they'll automatically click with you also. Yeah, this is what I firmly believe.
I think it's a time. It quite take time to work with the students.
Yes. I totally agree. That's why I say time will only tell you how much they actually want you to be there. Yeah. So teachers, parents, don't give up hope. I don't say it really.
Okay.
Yeah. So some teachers don't do it. I say, they want to quit already. After 2-3 years, I cannot. I want to quit already. I cannot. No, don't. And then sometimes you just have to be a little bit patient. Then you realize, okay, it makes sense.
So some questions again, some questions from Facebook. How do we establish the contact with child, because some parents used to be not able to communicate with their kids because they were too young. So
okay. So here we're talking about young children, is it?
Maybe I think the parents are quite young to
okay, young parents.
Parents.
All right. Okay, young parents are very interesting, yeah. Okay. Yeah. First, like I said, we need to understand why they decide to, go through that first. Like I mentioned, I always talk about the traumatic experience, the analyzing the triggers. Okay. Young parents, I tell you, they are always at this part where we call a lot of calafare. Oh, okay, can. Everything all can. Right? Because they are the can person. But if we put them down again, remember I told you about the joint approach. If you are everything all can, your child will not be able to face hardship. Remember I told you about the belief and the expectations. Young parents, how you touch base to them is to hit reality to them also. Okay? Because they themselves realize that, I'm a young parent, I have this child and so on and so forth. Why? Okay? You need to understand that when they take upon that role, they are also going through a state of shock. Okay? They are not ready to sometimes be parents, because being a parent, there's no manual. Like you turn on the TV, if the TV is not working, okay, you read back the manual and everything, right? Similarly to young parents also, it comes with a lot of experience for them to feel, my son is like that, it's because of that. My son goes through an explosion, but I've never gone through that. So we also feel that we need to guide them through. Yeah, about the cycle that I mentioned, right? The guidance is very important. Once we guide them through the whole entire process, and once we establish a trust with them, they will tend to open up. Okay. Young parents, I say, let me put a cautionary here, a disclaimer also. Yeah. Young parents, they always have this thing like, it's okay, right? Even if they feel in life nowadays, they can do so many things. Because the way they think and the way how we think is very different. Okay. But put it into retrospect that yes, you are still a parent and the child is still a child after all. At the end of the day, after probably 4 or 5 years, they are done with school, this child is yours. It's your fruit of labor. So if I don't give you a shock now to understand the reality, that's it. The child is not able to face hardship. So usually when I deal with such parents, I say difficult parents, challenging parents, and I always give them the reality bites. Ma'am, sir, if you think that your way, your parenting style works that way, this is what's going to happen. So I always give the cause and effect. You want to do this? Yes, we can wait many months, whatever it is. The moment we go through exams or whatever it is, if the result is like that, then because this is what you picked on. So parents need to see what we call the data. Okay, they don't see data, they cannot visualize certain things, right? They will just keep on deny. So what you can do also, for example, is to show them proof, evidences of what you have done. This is what you do. Okay, take it as an individual approach. Every child is different. The data has to also be very individualized. This is child A, this is what you do. This is child B, this is what you do. So that one itself really give them, because right now I always mention to teachers and parents, I don't like the comparison. Once you compare A and B, right, it's very difficult for you to make a progression. So usually you compare the child from point A to point B. The child, the same child. From point B to point C, the same child. So then parents are able to see, there's actually a learning curve. Instead of comparing child A and child B, child A and child B, child A and child B, that's it. The parents will get very confused. So that's why I said there must be a trend in what we're looking at. Yeah. Hope I answer your question too.
So here's another question. When a child's behavior seems stuck or keeps repeating, it's easy to feel hopeless. So how can parents and teachers rebuild a sense of hope and patience in such situations?
Very good question. So good that I would say that, I told you, right, about my years of experience with parents and with teachers, yeah. And 18 years old will not be 18 years old forever. Yeah. Okay, that's what I have to tell parents, yeah. Because parents sometimes they get very eager, Oh, my 13 years old, it's always behaving. That's what I will say. A 13-year-old will not be a 13-year-old forever. They will go through a stage of maturity, I would say. Okay. Once they mature, right, you will see I would say there's definitely a progression. Okay, there is no way that a 13 years old will behave a 13-year-old at the age of 31. Yeah. So if you require maybe 10 years to reach to that pinnacle of success, as parents, you just have to be patient, I would say. Because sometimes, like I say, once you make comparison with your, your relative son, your relative daughter, that's when you feel low. But if you make comparison with just your child progression, right, then you feel whole. That's something that I find it very difficult to explain to teachers and parents, because how to make the child feel wholesome is to look at the child holistically. Okay, there is no way for us to actually see the child in totality if you want to see miracle happens overnight. Okay, always believe that who you are right now is not how you are 5 years ago. Yeah, a teacher is not an experienced teacher if they don't go through challenges after challenges after challenges after. I used to have a very good senior teacher, right? She's superb in delivering. And sometimes I try to be like her. And I say, oh, she's very good. I try to model her on that kind of behavior, but it doesn't work. And when I understood how she actually does certain things, her midnight chores is to understand each and every one of her students. So she does the homework of this child like that. She comes to school really early to study the child. So that part is, like I say, it's not something that is going to happen overnight. So always believe that 18 years old is never an 18 years old forever. Teachers, parents, if you're listening to this, you're tuning to this live, like I say, you will see the change. Okay, I've seen so many different students along my life. They can be somewhat like I would say terrors in their school, but suddenly they became the best of the best profession. And when they called me in public, I'm like, wait, who are you? Are you the same person as I saw when you're in high school? Because in high school you challenged me, but now I say, oh, Chil, I came back to actually give some talks, and I am actually a police officer. You're a police officer now. In the past you were not like this. So yeah, so all these things, like I say, it requires a lot of time. That's why I say when you talk about child development, it's a journey, it's a progression, but it's the child themselves. Never put into comparison A and B, but it's always A all the way. Yeah. So similarly, I say it's always understanding the child as a whole. Similarly, like sometimes you overthink, I'm not a good teacher, I'm not a good parent. What do I do with myself? Why? You always have the why. So instead of saying the why, let's go about how. Once you do the how, you feel a little bit more less reluctant to actually change. Yeah, this is what I always do. When we talk about self-reflection, especially for us, having to counsel people every day, sometimes it's a burden for us. Wow, you see this person, you have to counsel again, right? And then you have to let go of that little client and then move. So usually I do a lot of self-reflection. Once I do a self-reflection, because I have to handle 2 children also at home, right? Being a mother myself. So if I manifest that kind of anger I have, the moment I reach home, I will. So I'm not. It's very hard for us to go through what we call gentle parenting these days. Sometimes you snap certain things, but if you try to model that calm behavior I mentioned earlier on, you will ensure that your child will also be very calm. Yeah. So this part is all about modeling, I would say. As adults, you really, really need to model certain behavior for the child to actually see you as someone that they can actually agree upon. So always believe an 18 years old, 16 years old will never be a 16 or 18 years old 10 years later. So yes, it's a challenge. Yes, you may see that, but take it as 1 year as 365 days. They will change within that 365 days. You just believe that, yes, along that 365 days, there will be some changes along the way. I mean, I do hope I answer your question, Miss Chan, but this is a very, very good question, I would say. Yeah, I mean, we can only pray so hard for a child to change, but yeah, I always say, you come to school, if everyone is good, then where's the challenge? Yeah. So this is something that I always look upon. Yes.
Human works never easy.
That's the thing. That's why I always say, a teacher will never survive the industry if you don't have the heart.
Yeah.
It's not just about the lip service. You can be very good at explain, but if you don't have the heart, right? I tell you, they always say, because I have a lot of few Chinese friends, wow, I tell you, San Lao Ting, I see this boy, San Lao Ting, every day. So I'm like, okay, relax. Okay, let's have a tea break, This is what I do. So usually in my little room, I always have a snack corner. I tell, okay, relax on my sofa, I take some chocolates. And and sometimes I tell her, hey, you know what, just go for a spa break, Life is always like that. The more you feel down, the more you feel very low. When you go to class, you also feel very low. Yeah, so they always say, how do you always feel happy all the time? I said, it's not that I feel happy all the time, but I always tell them that with empathy, it goes a long way. I would say that. So the empathy is very important, I would say.
Naturally, self-care of teachers or parents
Yes,
quite and very
correct.
important in this.
Agree, Miss Chan. Yes, you need to. That's what I said. You always need to love yourself before you want to love others. Yeah. So there's no way for you to try and do this kind of thing. The compassion part doesn't work that way. But if you understand yourself better, why would like I mentioned about the fake part, right? This undefined superpower that's given to you. Why are you a counselor in the first place? That's always the reason why you're a counselor. Yes, maybe you pick but you try to maneuver around. Hey, you know what? I'm a counselor because I'm dedicated. I'm a teacher because. So it's a predetermined thing that is fated for you to be like that. That's why I always tell teachers, maybe you are like a magnet. You actually attract all the challenging behavior in your class. Then they say, yeah, that's why every year I try to pray so hard. I don't get this kind of students. But every year also I get this kind of students. And then there's always a reason why you get this kind of students, because it's a magnet, I say. Yeah. So I'm not saying about luck, but I'm always saying about, it's fated. Things are fated. Who you are with, why the students are like that. And then it's a predetermined thing, I would say. So if you take it with a pinch of salt, you see these students maybe for about 4 to 5 hours, and then after that you enjoy yourself, and then that's about it. Parents also, you need to do self-care. You see this particular son of yours, always misbehaving. But then I tell you what, okay, have a good sleep. Maybe tomorrow your son will be better. If not better, then maybe wait for a week. So you present yourself as always trying to find good things about people. Once you find good things about people, then you realize that, you don't have to be, like I say, painful to your heart. Yeah. This is what I say. Because that's why, these days when people say, something is so cancerous, because you keep it to heart, right? But if you let it go and then, okay, let's move on, slowly we can. So you work along with the child feels the vibe. Once the child feels the vibe, the child knows that you're very sincere. Once you're very sincere, you're very genuine, right? There's no way for the child to actually misbehave, to be honest.
Okay.
That's what I feel.
Yeah. So, here, wait, okay.
I think I have some questions also over here. Should I answer? Because I think they mentioned about what kind of boundaries that teachers can benefit while showing care to students, and I think when we mentioned that, like how do we actually understand the child's behavior, but what if the behavior stems from trauma, neglect, family pressure? How can parents and teachers intervene safely without the psychological background? I think this part, like I say, right, as far as we're concerned, when we're talking about trauma and neglect and family pressure, again, I don't want to touch base, because if I were to really open the can of worms, we do deal with a lot of teenagers this age where they snap under the pressure, and then I don't want to say this word, but I think it's taboo, but it's real. It's really happening. If you look at the statistics about teenagers, quitting and going through the route of just stepping or whatever it is, right? We want to ensure that we always have to see where is their trigger point. Okay, once you understand where is the trigger point, right, you can actually see there's a lot of benefits out of it. Because sometimes parents, right, the more you pressure, the more you feel that, this is what we're going to do, right? Does it actually benefit you, or does it benefit the child? Okay. If it benefit the child, then you do it. Because at the end of the day, right, I feel personally, parents are not trying to do their very best when they are connecting with their children. They always say that, what, I give you everything already. You want this, I give you. I want this. That's not what the child wants. Like I mentioned, being present is what the child wants. Sometimes the child can be so broken, but the child wants you to be present. Okay, so this part, I say, this is something that I say it requires a lot of multiple workshops, I guess, that we need to go through certain trainings. Maybe this part really, there's a lot more topics that we're going to talk about, but this is something that I can just put it in brief. Yeah, so I think there's this one. What kind of boundaries that teachers can benefit from while showing care to students? There's plenty of benefits, I would say. Like I say, the boundaries is very clear. You must know that you're a teacher. ultimately these students actually still have their parents. That's why I mentioned about the unified approach. Always ensure when there's a trigger point. I always tell my colleagues, when there is a trigger point of what I said, there are signs where you need to alert the parents. You automatically have to alert the parents. You can't say, oh, you know what, it's okay, it's okay. The students tell me, I trust you. Don't tell my mom. Don't tell my dad. Don't. No, they are still somebody else's child. Okay, this I always emphasize with all my colleagues before them. Okay, there are a lot of benefits, yes, as a teacher, but please, when there's a trigger point for us to put a stop to it and we have to alert the parents, we have to alert the parents no matter what. So that kind of thing, I tell you, the boundaries is very clear. Black is black, white is white. There's no gray line when you're talking about that. Yeah. I think the next one is how to re-establish contact with. I think this one Ms. Chan actually mentioned, right? The re-establishment, like I say, sometimes because the child is too young and something like that, it requires a lot of stages. Child development is not only at a plateau stage, it's ever growing, ever evolving. It's always globalized. Go for multiple parenting workshops to understand between spouse and spouse, teachers and parents. There's a lot of workshops, for you to attend to each other to really, really understand what and how and why and when and where to communicate. All these things, there's a certain juncture that we're looking at. Even though they are young, whatever you say, I'm actually a firm believer. Sometimes some parents, right, as young as probably before the child talks, you tend to baby talk to the child. Oh, you know what, you want to poo, pee, all these languages, it matters a lot because when the child grows up, the child says, oh, I can just baby talk because it's fine. But if you talk to the child as an adult from young, right, sometimes the child's thinking also matured faster, which is also a scary thought. But we know where to put a stop to it. Yeah. So this part, I said, when you're talking about re-establishment, just be very present at that moment. What is the requirement of that child at the moment? If the child requires you to be there because the child is feeling sad, find out why the child is sad. So that's how you re-establish. You cannot do everything. Pick where you can. Battles will always come along the way, but pick what you can. One at a time, solve it, move along. One at a time, move and solve it. Yeah?
Okay.
So do you have any other questions? Yeah.
Evening. For the last question, maybe.
Okay.
When the children express their needs through inappropriate behavior rather than worse, so what can parents do to support healthier communication? A bit similar to the last question the band do.
Okay. Yep. I always tell parents here, find out their routines. Okay. That's why I mentioned about environment and routines are very important. How do the child actually get access to all this information from? Is it from school? Is it from the social media? Is it from where the parents are? Like I said, I may be just sharing what I actually know from my experiences as a parent and also as an experience as an educator. Yeah. A child is a child after all. No matter what, you're the adult there. You are always the key player. If the child manifests certain behavior, it's what they watch, it's what they actually hear, it's what is actually spoken to them. Right? If I were to actually emphasize about the Confucius teaching, because in my previous school is actually the Confucius teaching and everything, right? They always mention about filial piety, right? Okay. If you show the example of what filial piety is with your own parents, I'm very sure there is this connection of your child seeing you also, oh, you know what, it's very important for me to also behave in that way. But there sometimes can be this reconnection where you stop. Okay? Oh, I tell you what, you can have your devices right now because this is what the best way for us to actually give it to you. And then the child picks up certain things and you're like, what happened here? Reflect. Okay. I always say, when you reflect, is when you actually look yourself in the mirror. Okay? It's not just looking in the mirror and say, oh no, I want to look pretty. No. It's a lot of deep thoughts. Yeah. Deep thoughts to understand, oh, you know why? Why is at this stage my child is using those languages? What could have wrong? Oh, is it because on that particular day I was talking to myself and I was so angry with my boss, I actually used a certain term? Oh, it could be that the child watched certain things and I didn't stop that behavior. It could be that at that moment itself, like I told you, right, the immediate feedback is very important, right? If you wait and that thing escalate, right, and it's normal behavior. This is something that I always share with a lot of parents, If you wait till the very last minute, To you, it's okay, never mind. It's so cute, that behavior. For them to talk this thing. I had this moment, I had this workshop about, this YouTube where there was this mess about, if you know about the skibidi toilet, I've seen in front of myself, they look at the YouTube and then this creature coming out from the toilet bowl and everything. So I'm like, actually, this thing, very cute, very cute. Yes, you may think it's very cute and everything, but you must understand why you actually have this process of rotting your brain, and it becomes a earworm, right? It's where the child feels, actually it's okay, I'm watching this with my mom and my dad, or my dad never say anything, my mom doesn't say anything. When I talk to my teacher, my teacher, that is where I find it's a triggering point. As an adult, if you don't model the right behavior, and to you, everything is so cool, I can do this, everything is so cool, right? Because you want to be with them, you want to be their friend. But you have to understand you are still an adult after all. What is right is right, what is wrong is wrong. And sometimes if I have to put into retrospect to parents and also teachers, right, I always, sometimes they think that I'm a joke. I always tell them. But understand, in whatever religion, right, there is always hell and heaven, I told them. So when we are teaching our kids also, right, there is always right and wrong. What is right is right, what is wrong is wrong. When it's wrong and you have to actually face the punishment, you have to face the consequences, you have to face the punishment and consequences. And if it's right, if you have to receive the correct rewards, the correct positive reinforcement, you have to face. So whatever behavior at that point of time, you need to analyze. Why did it happen? How did it happen? Where did it happen? When did it happen? So parents and teachers are, your job is like never ending. Yes. Sometimes you become a peacemaker, but this is what it is. Yeah. I'm not trying to say that, raising a child, this era, is difficult. It is very challenging, I would say. But like I mentioned, and I bold it, I say seeking support. Please, don't be shy. This is a time that you cannot be shy when you're talking about it. That's the reason why I mentioned about the grief cycle. If you have to go through all these things, please, it's not something that you can shy away. In the past, yes, our grandparents like, never mind, I tell you, this thing will pass through, this thing will pass through. Because why? During maybe 20, 30 years ago, there is no technology. We don't have all this media. We don't have all this influence of internet. Yeah. A is A, B is B. Now I tell you, the A can become something else, right? Yeah. Our project can be done by ChatGPT, the AI, whatever it is. We don't know who we are talking to also. Yeah. In the past, when we see this girl very pretty, means very pretty. But right now, a lot of things can happen. So all these things, we have to safeguard our children. I always, again, emphasize, adult is still an adult. A child is still a child after all. So be very mindful of any changes of behavior. That's why I emphasize that if the child used to be very bubbly and the child actually becomes very quiet, please, it's not, they're going through some puberty stage, Watch. Okay, if it requires like 2-3 days, after a week, you still see, then you need to understand. All these things, there's a lot of factors. Yeah, like I told you, right, I have a girl who actually wear the hoodie and the mask, or because it's an outbreak of the acne, all these things are telltale signs. Yeah, because whatever is here is hidden. We don't know what's inside. Whatever is here is also hidden. Yeah, so the internal part we cannot see. So whatever they are externalizing, and then they say, okay. Actually, it's not an okay altogether. It's really for you to unpack that okay with them. Especially these days, they give you a thumbs up. Now through messages, right? You can just give a reaction, right? Like, wow, you react to whatever I said. You don't even reply with words anymore. So that is the one that I say. It's always to analyze the triggers. Yeah, I hope I do answer that question. But it requires a lot of workshops, a lot of training for us to really understand each other. If I do have another opportunity, maybe that there's always a way for us to dwell further into all this case, which I like to say case studies. I always like to listen to teachers' case studies, where we talk about really, really real-time examples. For us to really understand, how do we actually understand teenagers this stage, parents. Please, again, I say, you are not alone in this journey. Yeah, never alone. That's why I always tell parents, if you're stressed, if you need to find a caregiver for 2 hours for you to do your spa treatment, find 2 hours, pay them, and then go somewhere else. Teachers also, if you are going to report sick, whatever it is, don't fault yourself. Yeah. again, like what Miss Chan actually mentioned, yes, it's true. Self-love, self-care, everything all about self first. Then only you can care for others. Yeah, it's very important. I say, mental health is not something that we are going to joke about. Yeah, since your school is emphasizing about the awareness for this month, which is very good. Because I find that these days people make it as a joke. Okay, which I think is not healthy. They may think, oh, you know what, depression, my time don't have all this. And no, please, it's not something that we can joke about. You know, that's why I say once they crack under the pressure, right, their belt, that's it. It's not a fun thing when you actually lose a friend or you lose someone that you love. This is something that's why I always tell myself, be very mindful about what we say, the power of words, the choice of words, whatever you say, be very, very careful. So that part, like I said, you have to really, really understand the child. You know, if you see certain milestone, a good parent, or you know, sometimes they have to accept the flaws. Yeah, the imperfection is something that because all of us are not perfect, I tell you, seriously. You know, so if you're not perfect, how can you ask a child to be perfect also? The child may be saying certain thing at the point of time, because why? You know, we also probably say certain things at our point of time. It's a growing thing, I would say. Yeah, so how you actually model to reason it out to the child is how the child takes it in. Yeah. So if you're the sort of parents who really, really shock feels a little bit, also get angry, a little bit also get angry, right? Then I think parenting workshop will probably help you. You know, for you to go through that trauma stage, for you to be able to accept why are you like that, so that you don't crack under pressure that easily. Yeah. You know, some parents also, you know, they do react to violence. Everything also, you know, in the past they say you spare the rod, you spoil the child, right? You know, everything, they use that whip, they whip. This time they say, oh no, it's all about gentle parenting, or must talk to them. Then the child become very rude, that kind of thing. But you know, it is what it is. You know, if you're gonna beat your child, you're gonna wall up your child, you're gonna whatever you're gonna do. At the end of the day, it's all about love. You love them for who they are. That's the most important thing. That's why I said, please, from your love, don't lose them. So that's something that I would like to strongly emphasize. The partnership that teachers and parents have usually is all about love. You know, teachers sacrifice their many nights to do certain things. Parents sacrifice their many nights to get to where they want their child to be. So it's all about love, I tell you. You know, something that I can't say much, but you know, words can only describe that much. But if you are able to express genuinely, it's something that you want to do. I do hope I don't oversay certain things, but yes, empathy is something that the world needs. You know, I'm not trying to say, world peace, no. But if we can have a peaceful environment in our home, then that's enough.
Yeah.
Let's not compare us to something else, you know, that we can't. You know, if we can't afford a certain things at a certain time, we don't, then ask for help. You know, I always say, ask for help. That's a very important component that most of us don't want to do. Why? Why do you want to ask for help? You know, some people say, you lose face, or you know, you do this, you lose face. You lose face temporarily, but the support is long term. Yeah.
Very fruitful sharings. Actually,
thank you, Miss Shah. Yeah, I mean, I do hope I have more time, you know, to really, really share with the people out there. But thank you. I mean, this golden opportunity is something that, like I told Miss Chen, you know, I love to do all this sharing, this talk, so that I do gain exposure with all of you. You know, especially educators around the world. You may have certain issues that I may not have ever encountered, and it's always a learning cycle. You know, I learn from you and you learn from me, and I always say I learn from people through all this networking. Yeah, you know, that's why I say I enjoy traveling. I talk to people. You know, sometimes people say, you know, from your face you have a lot. Not from my face, just a lot of experience, but it requires a lot of listening skills to have a heart.
So we learn forever. We learn everything.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's why I say this is something that. Even if I were to share a little bit, right, Mishan, you have a few potted plants at the back, right? The indoor plants, is it at the back? Is it the background or something like that? But I just want to share, because I do have a friend, right, who does all this succulent, all these plants. Then I try to plant myself also. I say, how come my plant every time die? Then my friend said, maybe you're always very angry with the plant.
Okay.
I said, so my friend said, oh, maybe you're only good with human being, no? With plants, you always say, hey, why never grow? So it's true. That's why I say sometimes, if you're good at something, it means you're good at something. That's why in the world, right, there is different field for all of us. If you're meant to be doctors, you're meant to be nurses, you're meant to be teachers, you're meant to be counselors, it's fated. Yeah. So similarly, like I said, no matter how hard you try also, right, things will not happen. Things will not happen. I always believe in that. So that's why when I look at your potted plant background, I was thinking, it's very true because I tried so many potted plants actually. Until at the point I just give up. Okay, I'm not going to plant anything around my house. But
Maybe we
yeah,
have
so
to know how to
but yeah, thank you so much. You know, it is a session that I have now. Yeah. So, any other questions or anything that I can take from the floor?
I think the questions is already you already answered very close tonight, and with
Thank
that,
you. Yeah.
into tonight's sessions. Thank you truly to each and everyone for spending time with us, and we hope this sharing tonight has not only given you insight but also comfort and the reminder that we are all in this journey together as parents, teachers, and caring adults. I really thank you, Michelle, for your wisdom, your warmth, and your dedication to building bridge between home and school. It's not easy work. I do believe it's very hard work to do so. You inspired us to work together with trust, complexion, and consistency so that every child can feel, I think they will do being support both at home and in the classroom. I think I have a hope here that let us to carry this lesson forward into our daily lives, our conversation, and most importantly, into the heart of the children we guide. It's very important to believe that. So please stay tuned for more thoughts in this series and feel free to share what you have learned with someone who might need it too. So thank you once again and take good care and have a peaceful and restful night. Good night.
Yes. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Yep. Okay, I really appreciate everyone. Thank you, Miss Chan. Thank you, Mr. Lee, and thank you, Miss Chen. Hopefully we will see each other. Yeah. Have a good night too. All right. Bye.
Bye.